The Psalms. The Psalms are poetic hymns and by their very nature are addressed to God or express truths about God. Two elements we want to look at here. First, the poetic features of rhyme and repetition look a little different in Hebrew poetry. Secondly, they are very beneficial to us, but frequently psalms are misapplied. Let's see what Fee and Stewart mean by that. As a distinct genre, we need to understand the nature of the psalms, their various types, as well as their forms and their functions. The Psalms as poetry. Hebrew poetry, by its very nature, was addressed to the mind through the heart. Psalms are basically musical poems. They are intended to evoke feelings that straight propositional statements seldom do. And while they contain and reflect doctrine, they are not really intended as repositories of doctrinal exposition. The Psalms as poetry. The vocabulary of poetry is purposefully metaphorical. For example, you have things like fortresses and shields and rocks and these kinds of figures of speech that we don't always take literally. Okay? So they're metaphorical. As literature, the Psalms are of several different types. Each psalm is also characterized by its formal structure. Each type of psalm is intended to have a given function in the life of Israel. Remember, step one in the hermeneutical method is to determine what did this genre, this piece of literature mean to the original audience. There are various patterns within the Psalms, acrostics, stylistic plays on words, this sort of thing. The Psalms are literary units, so one has to be careful when interpreting the Psalms not to remove a few verses out and decontextualize it. It can lead to a wrong conclusion and therefore a wrong interpretation. Psalms were functional songs for use in worship by Israel. They make connections between the worshiper and God. It is very difficult to date many of the Psalms, though this is not really a large exegetical problem since they are so applicable to all times. The book of Psalms was probably not completed until the post-exilic period. Now, it is possible to group Psalms into 7 different categories. There's some overlap in these categories, but these are going to help us to learn the Psalms and how to understand them better. There are laments. This is the largest group of Psalms. They're corporate and individual laments. They express distress in a deep and honest way, and they include 6 elements. There's the address, the complaint, the trust of the worshiper, deliverance of the worshiper, assurance, and praise. Thanksgiving psalms express joy to the Lord because something had gone well. They were communal, and there were individual thanksgiving psalms. Some of the features of the thanksgiving psalms are an introduction, a distress, an appeal, deliverance, and testimony. There are salvation history psalms. They concentrate on the history of God's redemption of his people. These were used for different purposes like celebration, thanksgiving, warning, and so forth. The psalms of celebration and affirmation include covenant renewal liturgies, psalms that deal with kingship and the Davidic promises, enthronement psalms, and the songs of Zion. Wisdom songs specifically praise the merits of wisdom and the wise life. Songs of trust center on the fact that God can be trusted even in times of despair, suffering, and heartache. A special note on imprecatory psalms. Now, these psalms serve as a model for us on how to be angry by expressing our anger directly to and through God rather than seeking to return evil to those who have wronged us. These don't contradict Jesus' command to love our enemies, but properly place anger toward others into God's hands. This is very important for exegeting imprecatory psalms properly. Now, some concluding hermeneutical observations. The Psalms function as for us as a word from God in the same way it was for Israel, an opportunity to speak to God with inspired words. The three basic benefits of Psalms are: number one, the Psalms can serve as a guide to worship. 2, the Psalms demonstrate to us how we can relate honestly to God. 3, the Psalms demonstrate the importance of reflection and meditation on that which God has done for us. So, class, if you are working on a psalm, if you're doing your exegetical paper on a psalm, follow these guidelines and be certain that you have properly understood and exegeted your passage.